Welcome to Reality Theory, episode 17, Donald Trump and the Knights of Malta. So this is going to be an interesting episode. I know people have said I pick on the Bidens too much. Well, equal opportunity, where I see evil, I go after it. So we're going to look at Donald Trump's kind of deep state relationships. He's always complaining about the deep state, but he has his own deep state that has a crazy history to it. So let's look at Donald Trump and the Knights of Malta. All right, so Donald Trump and the Knights of Malta. Right here in the middle, we have Donald Trump. To the right, we have someone a lot of people know, Erik Prince, who is somewhat of a religious crusader, a modern day Knight of Malta, who are an old group of warrior monks, warrior priests, attached to the Catholic Church, who would fight during the Crusades. Some of these other people you might not know. Joseph Schmitz is an advisor to Donald Trump and a former Pentagon official. He's also works with Erik Prince at Blackwater, and he's an official Knight of Malta. And we're going to get into what a Knight of Malta is. I know some of you guys might not know what a Knight of Malta is. Down below him, we have Paul Behrends, who is also a Knight of Malta, and it was the congressional aide to Dana Rohrabacher, who gave Erik Prince his internship. So Erik Prince got his start in politics, at least, through this guy, Paul Behrends, who is a Knight of Malta. And then he would work with Joseph Smith, who was also a Knight of Malta, through Dana Rohrabacher. And William Barr might not be a Knight of Malta, but he's very closely associated with a religious organization, a secret religious Catholic organization called Opus Dei. And we're going to get into what all these things are and how there's a kind of religious cult deep state that's been going on for a very long time and is trying to get back in power through Donald Trump. And it is the deep state, but it's another part of the deep state. So what we're seeing is a fractured deep state fighting for power. So Donald Trump's mentor was Roy Cohn. There's a lot of good documentaries on Roy Cohn. Give me my Roy Cohn. There's a lot of good information on him via Whitney Webb and her book about blackmail. But Roy Cohn was a gay Jewish lawyer who had a lot of questionable associations and questionable allegations. Now, one of his closest associates was a man to the upper left-hand corner called Louis Rosenthal, who was a bootlegger connected to Meyer Lansky. He was also bisexual, and his wife, Susan Kaufman, claims that she caught Roy Cohn and Louis Rosenthal in bed together as homosexuals. And she also claimed she saw J. Edgar Hoover at a party, I think in room 233, called the Blue Suite, dressed up as a woman and asking people to call him Mary, and that these people would be involved in sex acts. And there are other allegations through a New York detective called Dave Rothstein that Roy Cohn, Louis Rosenthal, and J. Edgar Hoover were also involved in like a sex trafficking ring of minor boys. So let's look at some of his other connections. So J. Edgar Hoover, who we talked about, was very close with Roy Cohn. They partied together. I don't know if you guys know about J. Edgar Hoover. I went over J. Edgar Hoover in my episode on the MLK assassination. He was a very evil, racist, right-wing fanatic. He loved government surveillance. It's amazing that they have buildings named after these guys. And for a lot of reports, he was a closeted homosexual in a relationship with his number two, Clyde Tolson. Now, interesting enough, his number three, Cartha DeLoach, was in the Knights of Malta, and Cartha DeLoach helped cover up the JFK assassination, according to Jim Garrison, who's, if you've ever seen the movie JFK, he's the big lawyer Kevin Costner plays, and he's written a lot of books about the JFK assassination. He actually took it to trial and it got sabotaged. Another close friend of Roy Cohn, who's also a Knight of Malta, is Bill Casey. And a lot of heads of the CIA, like Bill Casey, who's head of the CIA, were Knights of Malta. And this goes back all the way to John McCone under Kennedy. We've had, while Bill Donovan wasn't the head of the CIA, he was kind of the head of the OSS. And a number of other prominent people in the CIA have been members of the Knights of Malta. Now, Roy Cohn's law partner was Thomas Bolin. He was also in the Knights of Malta. And And he was also a big Reagan guy. So we have a kind of connection here between Bill Casey, who worked with Reagan, Tom Bolin, who worked with Reagan. And to the far right corner, we have Cardinall Spellman, who is seen as the spiritual protector and grand, the grand protector and spiritual advisor of the Knights of Malta. So he was really a big figure in the Knights of Malta. He's also definitely connected with the CIA. He is the one who linked the OSS, the predecessor to the CIA, with Lucky Luciano, which kind of started the alliance between the mob and the CIA, and with the Catholic Church in the middle. He was also involved in the 1954 coup of Guatemala, helping, again, working with the CIA. So there was a lot of original OSS people who were also Knights of Malta: James Jesus Angleton, Bill Casey, Wild Bill Donovan. We'll get to these people later. So what is the Knights of Malta? So a lot of people are familiar with the Knights of Templar. If you watch movies or documentaries, you're familiar with the Knights of Templar. So Knights of Malta are similar to the Knights of Templar. We see that J. Edgar Hoover was a Knight Templar, and the Knights of Templar right of him. Among his many Masonic honors is the Grand Lodge of New York Achievement Award, his Grand Chapter Gold Medal, and the Scottish Rite S.J. Grand Cross. Sir Knight Hoover has authored 3 books: Persons in Hiding, 1938, Masters of the Sea, 1958, and The Study of Communism, 1962. In addition to articles contributed to Knight Templar, this magazine he writes for, which is about the a kind of secret Masonic society based on an old society. We'll get into it. In the past, he's written numerous feature articles and law reviews, police journals, and other magazines and papers. John Edgar Hoover is a bachelor. Yeah, this is what state of bachelor. A practicing Presbyterian, so he's not Catholic, and we'll get into that. The original Templar Knights were all Catholic. A man of integrity, outstanding character, and great ability. He has a warm personality, tremendous energy, and is devoted to his country and his fellow citizens. So now let's see what the Knights Templar say about both themselves and also the Knights of Malta, who we're going to get into. The period of the Crusades extended from 1096 to 1272, and during the early years of the Crusades, 3 orders of knighthood were founded and have left their records on the pages of history. In the order of their establishment, these orders are the Knights Hospitallers of St. John in Jerusalem, later known as the Knights of Malta, organized in 1048 as a Hospitaller order and became military in 1119. Knights of the Temple of Solomon, or Knights Templar, organized 1118 as a military and religious order. So that's what he's talking about, his own order. And the Teutonic Knights of St. Mary of Jerusalem, later known as the Teutonic Knights, organized 1190. These founders of these orders were all noble birth and were knights at the time of the termination of the orders. It's kind of covered up, so I couldn't read that right. There have been many other orders of knighthood in recorded history formed by these volunteer associations of members, but these 3 are the only ones that come to mind at the present writing. All other recognized chivalric orders were founded by kings and emperors or persons of royalty, such as the Knights of the Round Table by King Arthur, Knights of the Golden Fleece by Philip. I don't know if that's King Philip IV. Duke of Burgundy in Flanders, blah, 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 blah. In addition to the Knights Templar and Knights Malta, both of which were formed voluntary by Knights of Freemasonry, has the following legitimate order of knighthood: small selective groups which by tradition have backgrounds of royal funding. Knights of the Red Cross of Constantine, founded by Emperor Constantine the Great. Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, founded by Empress Helena, the mother of Constantine, and the Royal Order of Sconderton, founded by Robert Bruce of Scotland. All 5 of the above named orders of chivalry connected with Masonry are organized entities having national organizations, national officers, and are in no sense merely degree conferring groups, but exist as orders of knighthood with traditional and historical backgrounds. So that's the Knights. So a lot of you probably are familiar with the Knights Templar. If you have watched the Da Vinci Code, they're kind of the bad guys in the Da Vinci Code, trying to catch the Holy Grail and kill the descendants of Jesus. Okay. If you play Assassin's Creed, the video game, They're also the bad guys in Assassin's Creed. They're also in The Last Crusade by Indiana Jones. So that's some of them in pop culture. But people are going to ask, what happened to the Knights Templar? They were so strong and so powerful. Well, King Philip of France did not like them. And here's what he had to say, or here's what he did to them. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, members of the orders of the Knights Templar in France, under the orders of King Philip IV, were arrested en masse. Amongst the charges levied against the Templars were denying Christ, God, the Virgin, and the saints, committing sacrilegious acts against both the cross and images of Christ, denying the sacraments, performing idol worship, absolving fellow Templars of sin, engaging in secret ceremonies, illegally increasing their own wealth, placing obscene kisses on new entrants on the mouth, navel, and buttocks, and practicing sodomy. So a lot of what they were charged and convicted for, some of them were tortured and confessed. I don't know if that means they did it, but what they were charged for was not just sodomy, which is gay sex, but they were gay male sex, but they were also charged with like ritual sex. So it's not just like, two men just, having sex with each other. It's like rituals. It's like Nixium, like almost a very culty thing where they have ritual homosexual sex. So let's get into how Erik Prince fits in to the Knights of Malta. Again, Erik Prince is kind of in the middle of everything. We have his two buddies up here, Joseph Schmitz and Dana Rohrabacher. Now, it was this guy, Paul Behrends, who we're going to get into, who gave Erik Prince his first internship in Congress under Dana Rohrabacher. Now, while he was an intern, he was doing a lot of like CIA type stuff. He was traveling to Nicaragua. He was traveling to Yugoslavia. And one person, Dana Rohrabacher, who was kind of a mentor and the original person who gave Erik Prince his internship, is Dana Rohrabacher, who's very close to Oliver North. They fund each other's campaigns. They meet each other. Like Oliver North is always there to back Dana Rohrabacher. On the anniversary of the Grenada invasion, which Oliver North was a part of, and allegedly Dana Rohrabacher was part of as a CIA agent, they took a cruise ship to celebrate them invading Grenada. So Erik Prince is kind of seen as a modern day crusader, a kind of super right-wing Christian who's fighting on the battlefield against Muslims, but still he works with Muslims such as Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, better known as Prince MBZ from the UAE, where that's where Dubai is, and that's where Erik Prince wound up staying in Abu Dhabi in Dubai. And Khalifa Hifter is another person of Muslim descent who Erik Prince is working with. Now, there's a big war that's been going on in Libya pretty much since Gaddafi died. So that war where Hillary and Obama started to get rid of Gaddafi has turned really disastrous, and it's still going on. The news doesn't report on it. But one of the main warlords there is Khalifa Hifter, and he is being supported by MBZ, who also supports Erik Prince. So Erik Prince is bringing in his mercenaries who are actually fighting against the United Nations-backed government. So there's a UN-backed government that is not Khalifa Hifter, and then there's the MBZ, Erik Prince-backed rebellion, which is Khalifa Hifter. And he's been doing a lot in this war. He's even working with the Wagner Group, because the Wagner Group is actually working with Khalifa Hifter as well. The Wagner Group is definitely attached to Russia. So this is all a big mess of war and money. If you want to learn a lot about Erik Prince, I highly recommend you read a series of articles by Jeremy Scahill or his book on Erik Prince, and you'll see all the like horrible stuff Blackwater does. Obviously, people knew about like the civilians who were killed in Iraq, but there was also like underage sex trafficking they've been accused of, weapons trafficking they've been accused of, and having a culture of like steroids and kind of Christian supremacy, especially in these Arab countries where they go and occupy, and just like going to Iraq and just like Blackwater members will just randomly shoot into buildings filled with Iraqis. So We have Erik Prince, who's been listed as a Knight of Templar, and his mentor, we see Joseph Schmitz, or his friend, and his mentor, Paul Behrends, who we'll get into, who gave Dana Rohrabacher Erik Prince as a mentor. So he is a modern-day crusader. He is working with extremely right-wing, I would say, Islamic supremacists who believe Islam is the supreme religion. And yet he is a Christian supremacist who believes Christianity is the supreme religion. And I guess money is a common denominator, and that makes it happen. Also, I do think he's really still trying to fight these crusades in the Middle East for Christianity. So here's Dana Rohrabacher, who is Erik Prince's first job on Capitol Hill as a staffer, who would send him to Nicaragua and Yugoslavia on these fact-finding missions, which seemed like CIA front missions. So here is Dana Rohrabacher. He was a congressman from the Orange County near LA, California. He got voted out in office in 2018 after being elected since 1989. So he had a good 29-year run in office before getting voted out. And here he is with the Mujahideen. He actually talks about being like close to bin Laden in a couple news articles. So let's read about Rohrabacher. Rohrabacher saw firsthand evidence to support his claim. In November 1988, having just been elected to Congress, Rohrabacher took off on his first trip to Afghanistan. The anti-Soviet war was still raging as Rohrabacher set off a 5-day hike with an armed Mujahideen patrol from Pakistan into eastern Afghanistan. Sounds very CIA-ish. We were at one point in that march, I came across a group of tents, Rohrabacher said of his visit to Jalalabad, then under siege by Afghan rebels. I was told at this point I must not speak English for at least another 3 hours because the people in the tents were Saudi Arabians under a crazy commander named bin Laden, and that bin Laden was so crazy he wanted to kill Americans as much as he wanted to kill Russians. So Dana Rohrabacher was fighting alongside bin Laden, and I think he's trying to make it in retrospect look like he had the foresight to know that bin Laden would be this horrible terrorist that the US government is painting him to be. Even then, as Rohrabacher moved to the Jalalabad camp, bin Laden's force of Afghan Arabs was receiving the US aid Rohrabacher helped make public. So hey, thank you, Rohrabacher, for funding bin Laden. U.S. aid and assistance came back to haunt Americans so often that the intelligence community has a name for it, blowback. And no U.S. policy epitomizes blowback better than the American-led covert war in Afghanistan. Clearly, the CIA was playing with forces it couldn't control, much less understand. Bin Laden, who allegedly had ties to Saudi intelligence and allegedly had ties to the CIA too, I guess through people like Rohrabacher, which of course had contacts in the US intelligence community, recruited fundamentalist Muslim fighters from all over the world, China, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Kuwait, and a bunch of other places. Upon arrival, they had free access to weapons, military training, and radical Islamic teaching. All right. Now, this is where we kind of connect Dana Rohrabacher back to J. Edgar Hoover, in that both of them are cross-dressers. So Dana Rohrabacher, who says he was in the kitchen when, in the hotel kitchen when JFK's brother RFK was assassinated. So for the RFK assassination, he was there. So he's had a mission to go visit Sirhan, the alleged killer or alleged patsy, depending on what research you do, of Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy. So let's read about Dana Rohrabacher going in drag to solve RFK's murder. While the nation struggles with 2 wars, financial disasters, devastating hurricanes, regular political, sex, and ethics scandals, ridiculously priced gas, and global warming, Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, Republican from Huntington Beach, has been busy attempting to solve the already solved 1968 assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. I don't think it is solved. I believe that Sirhan is a patsy. According to a September 25th, 2008 Pasadena Weekly by Karl Kozlowski, Rohrabacher believes that Los Angeles police have a 40-year hidden the fact that Sirhan, the lone man convicted of shooting Kennedy, worked as part of a real conspiracy of Arabs. Why? Well, Rohrabacher, a rabid right-wing Republican who has bragged to me and other reporters about his longtime ties to the Central Intelligence Agency. I don't know how else you wind up in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen. Claims he was in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles for a party at the same time Kennedy was murdered in the kitchen. Now, it gets crazier in this article. I highly recommend you read this article in OC Weekly. And so what Dana Rohrabacher would do is he would go up and drag and change his name to Diana, and he would visit Sirhan, and he would try to get Sirhan to confess and say he was part of Islamic conspiracy, rather than people who really do research believe that RFK, even RFK's own son, believes his dad was killed part of a CIA conspiracy, and we see here that Rohrabacher is closely connected to the CIA. So in here we see him maybe trying to create a false narrative and not only blame Sirhan, but blame a wider Islamic conspiracy. Now, going back to the kind of sexual molestation that was going on with Louis Rosenstiel, Roy Cohn, and J. Edgar Hoover, and Cardinall Spellman. Cardinall Spellman was also accused of being in these kind of sex orgies, and also some with young men. And both J. Edgar Hoover and Cardinall Spellman would ask people to call them Mary. So I don't know if that's part of a cultist thing, or they both just have the same aliases when they decide to be women. So this is an aide to Dana Rohrabacher, and I think he kind of exemplifies a lot of the Christian hypocrisy that goes on. And I know a lot of people on the right are quick to pick on these left-wing Pizzagate pedophiles, and they might be right, but there are also a lot of pedophiles on the right, and I don't know what conspiracy they are a part of. It could be a Knight of Malta, Knight Templar conspiracy. I don't know. And it says, all right, so after years of viciously attacking his accusers and claiming OC Weekly was persecuting the self-described Christian conservative Orange County Republican activist and close Washington, D.C. aide to Rohrabacher, Jeffrey Ray Nielsen pleaded guilty in March 2008 of having targeted 7th, 8th, and 9th grade middle school boys for his sexual gratification. The son of former Mountain Valley Mayor Ben Nielsen, former intern for Orange County District Attorney Tony Rackauckus, and friend of then Sheriff Mike Corona, and country GOP Chairman Scott Bow, had also been charged with possession of a huge cache of man-boy and boy-boy sex pornography. Interesting age you have here, Mr. Rohrabacher. However, a bonehead mistake by prosecutors allowed that count to expire. How do you allow those counts to expire? Like there should be no statute of limitations on owning child porn or molesting children. You should be able to be convicted for that whenever. Okay. A judge sentenced Jeff Nielsen to 36 months in prison. He served 20 months. Only 20 months for molesting boys and having child porn. Okay. To find him now, check California's registered sex offender database, which should really appear on for life. Oh, that's a good thing. Now, here's where we get into the Knights of Malta. So we have another aide for Dana Rohrabacher is Paul Behrends. So Paul Behrends was a knight of the Supreme Military Order of Malta, SMOM, also known as the Knights of Malta, a lay order of the Catholic Church. At Easter 1992, Prince converted to Catholicism and was knighted into the tradition of Malta with Behrends. Here is Erik Prince. Okay, so it's how I can't really find where this guy's sources is. There's a Mindware blog. You can check it out. But he claims definitely that Erik Prince is in the Knights of Malta, and he was recruited by Paul Behrends, and Paul Behrends got him his internship with Dana Rohrabacher, who was also close with Oliver North. So, okay. So, Paul Behrends, he died and hit his head, right? He tripped and hit his head. It seems like a very suspicious death. Important people with important information who have intelligence ties and ties to secret societies. If they die and you just tell me they tripped and hit their head, I'm very suspicious that something else may have happened. All right, so let's read a little bit more about Paul Behrends. But it wasn't that simple, particularly in recent years when Behrends started to show up frequently in the press. While never a household name, he was known in Washington, D.C., particularly among those who dealt with foreign affairs. For many years, he was like the Forrest Gump of international intrigue, showing up in Afghanistan during the Soviet invasion, and then again after the U.S. invasion. Okay, so he likes Afghanistan, as does Dana Rohrabacher. They both have been to Afghanistan during the Soviet invasion and the American invasion. For many years, okay, sorry about that. He was in Yugoslavia as it began to splinter. So was Erik Prince. And after it fell apart. And then in Nigeria, amid the fighting with Boko Haram, the jihadist group that kidnapped over 200 schoolgirls in 2014. So he was very active up until, 10 years ago. I think he might have died 3 years ago. So it's very hard for me to believe he just tripped and hit his head, which we'll go into in a second. In many ways, his life was the stuff of movies. So whether you thought he was a hero or the villain sometimes depended on what side of the political aisle you walk along. He helped get weapons to the Afghan Mujahideen fighting the Soviet Union in the 1980s, landed Erik Prince an internship in Rohrabacher's Capitol Hill office in the 1990s, and worked with the lobbying firm notorious for its ties to Jack Abramoff, who was on the invite list but didn't show up. So this is about his funeral. So Erik Prince was a pallbearer at his funeral. Behrends' death at 62 was more straightforward than his life. When walking near his home, he tripped and hit his head on the concrete. That's not very straightforward to me at all. I don't believe that happened. That is the rarest, silliest way to die. I've never heard of anyone dying that way. If anyone told me, a friend of mine or anyone just tripped, hit their head and died, like that's a ridiculous. Something happened, and I know, the Republicans are all about like Seth Rich, and I'm about Seth Rich too. I want to find out what happened to Seth Rich, but who killed this guy? Who killed Paul Behrends? He didn't just trip and hit his head. That is a ludicrous explanation that doesn't satisfy any of my curiosity. Like, this guy is an intelligence officer, Marine, still involved in intelligence in his 50s and 60s, and he dies at 61 after he trips and hits his head. No, something else happened to him. That brought me to another question. What exactly was Behrends doing in Afghanistan in the 1980s? Even his friends weren't quite sure. One said he had gone as a private citizen. Another suggested it was perhaps for the CIA. And a third admitted they had no idea. When I called Rohrabacher this week after the funeral to ask, he told me there was no such thing as a concerned citizen in Afghanistan. In those days, we were just part of Americans who were taking things into their own hands. I think he means the CIA. That's who was. Those were the Americans over in Afghanistan working with Mujahideen. They were the CIA. They weren't concerned citizens. Concerned citizens stay at home, raise their children, do stuff like that. Go off and join radical Islamist Muslims fighting against communism. So again, here's a LinkedIn eulogy for Paul Behrends, a well-known professional staff member in the U.S. House of Representatives. He worked for years for Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, Republican for California, on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where he was staff director for the Eurasia Committee. That's a big role. He briefly served in the private sector in association with Blackwater USA, founded by his former intern, Erik Prince. Paul's Catholic faith and his deep concern for human rights and humanitarian relief motivated him to become a knight in the Sovereign Order of Malta, the Knights of Malta. He was a board member or active member of charities and humanitarian organizations. So this guy is definitely a Knight of Malta, a CIA guy, and we'll go into it. They're kind of the same. A lot of these CIA guys are Knights of Malta, and they work together on common goals. All right, so here we have something from Politico, which is interesting, that Paul Behrends also is tied to Peter Thiel, a big Trump supporter. So I don't know if Peter Thiel is a Knight of Malta, but it looks like he might be trying to be. Long before he took up his most recent post as an aide to Rep. Dana Rohrabacher, Behrends worked alongside the Afghan Mujahideen, helped the future Blackwater founder Erik Prince get an internship on Capitol Hill. Later, he navigated the security firm through the political fallout from 2000s 7 massacre of civilians in Iraq, and served as a chief lobbyist for a firm at the heart of the Jack Abramoff scandal. We've heard that before. More recently, has become a confidant of the pro-Trump Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel, and served as the Capitol Hill point man for the right-wing government of Hungary. I'm pretty sure there's some Knights of Malta in Hungary going on. So, all right. So right after this, Paul Behrends becomes friends with Peter Thiel, which is interesting. Peter Thiel is a out homosexual. He's married to a man. Catholic Church definitely doesn't approve of gay marriage or homosexuality in open. I mean, they might approve of it with priests, but not for regular people. And then Paul Behrends tries to get Maltese citizenship. I don't know if he wants to become a Knight of Malta like or Peter Thiel wants to get Maltese citizenship. I don't know if he wants to become a Knight of Malta like his buddy Paul Behrends or Erik Prince, possibly. I don't know. Or he wants, I don't know, it's a big Trump thing. So a lot of Trump people connected to this Paul Behrends guy, and a lot of them are also connected to Malta. So here's a picture of the old Knights of Malta. And you see a little, the black person doesn't look too happy in the corner. So not only like they try and make it seem like they're hospital knights and they're just like helping like a version of the Red Cross. They were a very brutal fighting group that was responsible for the slaughter of a lot of not only Muslims but also Jews in Jerusalem, the Holy Lands, Malta, throughout the Crusades, beginning in like the thousands up till when they ended in 13 because of the sodomy and the heresy. Here they are now. See, they still exist. They actually exist as like a sovereign country within Italy, like not unlike the Vatican. So they have their own currency, their own license plates, own post stamps. They're able to cross borders, do a lot of things that a lot of people can't do. Now, the CIA and the Knights of Malta have been working together, but since before the CIA was the CIA. So after World War II, we had the Pope and the Vatican were in Italy. Now, Italy was under Mussolini, and they were aligned with the Nazis. So a lot of the Vatican and the Catholic Church at the time was somewhat aligned with the Nazis. They were aligned with Mussolini. They were aligned with a lot of Catholics who were actually in the Nazi Party. So when the World War was over, the Knights of Malta and the CIA, the Vatican, and the Red Cross actually created a rat line that let a lot of ex-Nazi war criminals escape to South America. Now, I did a whole episode about Nazis in the Ukraine and also comparing it to the Nazi rat line with Klaus Barbie, Joseph Mengele, both of them who escaped through Nazi rat lines through the help of the Knights of Malta, the Vatican Church, and the Red Cross. So this is a kind of beginning of a working relationship between what at the time was the OSS and the Knights of Malta, and it continued as the OSS became the CIA. So these are those kind of 3 big figures who are all Knights of Malta and CIA. Richard Galen was Hitler's intelligence chief for Eastern Europe. He was recruited by Allen Dulles. And some people say Allen Dulles is in the Knights of Malta. Some people say he isn't. He's not Catholic, but not all Knights of Malta have been Catholic. His nephew is Catholic. He definitely worked with the Knights of Malta. Was he a member? I can't say for sure. But he recruited Richard Galen to the CIA and used Richard Galen as kind of his chief of operation in Germany for Eastern Europe to fight against communism. James Jesus Angleton is a notorious CIA character who again got his start in the OSS and eventually began to work with the Vatican. And he also worked with Israel and helped start the Mossad. And Wild Bill Donovan is an OSS guy and considered the founder and father of the CIA. And he is also a Knight of Malta, and he was also involved in bringing these kind of Nazi war criminals from Italy, Germany, to South America, where a lot of them continued to work for the CIA. I think John Cohn, Kennedy's CIA director, was also a Knight of Malta, and he was involved in the coup in Chile where Augusto Pinochet. So Augusto Pinochet was also a Knight of Malta, and he helped the CIA overthrow Allende in 73 on 9/11. And this was again through support of the Knights of Malta and the CIA. So they have been working together for a long time. Cardinall Spellman, who again was the Grand Protector and spiritual advisor to the Knights of Malta, I think I said it before, but he actually introduced the OSS to Lucky Luciano, which began the alliance of the CIA and the Mafia. So this guy, Robert McCauley, has been friends with George H.W. Bush, the father, president from 88-92. His whole life, they went to kindergarten together, Andover together, and Yale together. And some people have said that McCauley has served in the OSS, but he is part of this AmeriCares Foundation, which works very closely with the Knights of Malta and also with the CIA. So AmeriCares fronts like a charity, but it's kind of like a Trojan horse. And there's been allegations that's been used to ship weapons alongside with the Knights of Malta. So like all over Central America during Iran-Contra, they were shipping medical supplies to the Contras, which I don't know, a lot of the medical supplies turned out to be weapons. And because they have these kind of diplomatic protections, they're able to travel across from border to border without passing through customs. So if they were to smuggle drugs or weapons, it would be pretty easy. But this guy, McCauley, he's Episcopalian, but he is named one of the highest orders to the Knights of Malta because of the work that AmeriCares has done with the Central Intelligence Agency. And then and also they worked in Guatemala with another Knight of Malta who let them use his ranch so that they could train for the Bay of Pigs. They turned to him for Iran-Contra again. So there's a lot of Iran-Contra Knights of Malta connections going on in terms of them shipping aid to the Contras. Also, they would ship aid to the Mujahideen. They actually would bring the Mujahideen all the way to DC for medical treatment. And again, it's kind of a front of medical treatment. I don't believe it. I really don't believe it because they're naturally warriors. They're not like the Red Cross. They're not out to help anybody. They're out to fight wars and fight for Christianity and fight with the CIA. So that's Robert McCauley. He's the head of the AmeriCares. He also worked with George Bush's brother, Prescott Bush, not the father. This is Prescott Jr. and George Bush's other son, Marvin, also worked for AmeriCares. So it's definitely a very close relationship. I think he was asked. He would ship arms if the president asked him to, but he said he wasn't shipping arms. But he said if the president asked him to, he would. All right, so here are some confirmed members of the Order of Malta, according to Mind War. Erik Prince Blackwater, I don't know if it's on his resume or if he's a secret member. Paul Behrends, who we just went over. Joseph Schmitz, who we went over. Rupert Murdoch. William Casey. Alexander Haig, who was the Secretary of State for Reagan, also involved in Iran-Contra. William Donovan, who we went over. Leonard Leo, Federalist Society. Opus Dei, and we'll get into Opus Dei later, which is another Catholic organization very similar to the Knights of Malta. Phyllis Schafly, she's in the Eagle Form Dame. General Stanley McChrystal, Admiral William McRaven, Cardinal Raymond Burke, Nazi criminal Franz von Papen, and Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile, who was Prince Charles's good friend. Not sure if he was a member, but they definitely gave him an award. And they give out a lot of awards, like they give an award to Ronald Reagan. And so at least some people, if they get awards, are they members? It's not clear because they also have a very secret society. So they have some members who are on the open, like Paul Behrends and Joseph Schmitz, Bill Casey, all of them openly admitted to being in it. But other people on this list, like Stanley McChrystal, William McRaven, have denied being on the list. So here's Joseph Schmitz. For his part, Joseph Schmitz, the former Pentagon Inspector General turned General Counsel to Blackwater's parent, the Prince Group, lists on his resume membership in the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, a Christian militia formed before the First Crusade. That's the Knights of Malta. Like Prince, he comes from a right-wing family. His father, former Congressman John Schmitz was an ultra-conservative John Birch Society director. That's another crazy group, who later ran for president. Joseph Smith was once in charge of investigating private contractors like Blackwater, but he resigned amid allegations of stonewalling. He resigned amid allegations of stonewalling investigations conducted by his department. He now represents one of the most successful of these contractors. So this guy is not only kind of a crusader warrior, but he's also a mercenary. So he believes in war for religion and war for profit. An interesting note on him is his sister is Mary Kay Letourneau, the famous teacher who married and got impregnated by her student, went to jail and came back and married him. I might have said married before, but she married him after she got out of jail and had his baby. So the kind of Knights of Malta doesn't just apply to Blackwater. According to Seymour Hersh, is a kind of pandemic in the U.S. military, especially at the higher levels like JSOC. So this is Seymour Hersh, highly respected journalist. So Seymour Hersh charged that U.S. foreign policy has been hijacked by a cabal of neo-conservative crusaders in the former vice president's office and now in the special operations community. I think those would be Dick Cheney in Dick Cheney's office. That's the attitude. This is from 2011. That's the attitude, he continued. We're going to change mosques into cathedrals. That's an attitude that pervades, I'm here to say, a large percentage of the Joint Special Operation Command, JSOC. He then alleged that General Stanley McChrystal, who headed JSOC before briefly becoming the top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, and his successor, Vice Admiral William McRaven, as well as many within JSOC, are all members or at least supporters of Knights of Malta. Hersh may have been referring to the Sovereign Order of Malta, a Roman Catholic organization committed to the defense of the faith and assistance to the poor and the suffering, according to his website. But that's what they say on their website. They do see what they're doing, and this is not a typical attitude among some military. It's a crusade, literally. They see themselves as the protectors of the Christians. They're protecting them from the Muslims, as in the 13th century, and this is their function. So this is crazy, where some people are still stuck in the Middle Ages and still fighting religious crusades. Okay. So here's where Malta is, right? So Malta is a very important island. You can see it is very close to Italy, off the coast of Sicily. It's also very close to the Middle East and Africa. So it's a very important launching place. Now, coincidentally or intentionally, Blackwater and Erik Prince have always kept a base in Malta. I say so. This is from the Malta Independent. A European Parliament working document drawn up by Giovanni Claudio Fava has claimed Malta is the operational base of Blackwater, the organizer of private military militia, which are increasingly taking on more and more roles which used to be untaken by U.S. forces in Iraq and elsewhere. The EP committee report found that Malta's airspace and soil had been used by Blackwater USA subsidiary company Blackwater Aviation for extraordinary renditions. Extraordinary renditions is when you take someplace for another place to torture them. And that Malta has served as a European base for Blackwater aircraft carrying out renditions. So this is where they're kidnapping people and taking them to other places and torturing them. The EP report underscored that while Malta had been found to have been used on at least 7 occasions by 6 different aircraft known to have carried out renditions, the Maltese dynamic in such operations was not extensively investigated due to a shortage of time and the sheer number of countries that had warranted investigation. So they got off lucky, Blackwater, in that there was so much torturing and renditions going on that they couldn't investigate them all. So now, this is in 2019. As I told you before, Erik Prince and whatever the new name for his new Blackwater is, I'm just gonna call it Blackwater, not XE, or he has new names, but it's still the same kind of military contracts. A UN report describes how after 20 mercenaries arrived in Benghazi in June 2019, they became embroiled in a dispute with Haftar. He's the Libyan warlord who's he was CIA backed to take out Gaddafi. He did that, but then the UN said this guy is a crazy warlord. We can't support him. So the UN supported a different government, but the UAE and Erik Prince and possibly the CIA is still supporting Haftar, who accused them of failing to deliver a promised U.S.-made combat helicopters, but instead airshipping them tired civilian versions of Gazelle and Puma helicopters. Tensions rose, and on June 29th, the mercenaries bailed out of Libya by boat, leased by Blackwater Ammunition's James Fenwick's Sovereign Charters to Opus Capital, Opus Day, on a 40-hour journey across the Mediterranean until they would reach safety in Malta. So as recently in 2019, the Blackwater has been using Malta as a base. Now, the Knights of Malta have a fort still in Malta, which they're allowed to use. Malta is its own interesting independent country, but the Knights of Malta are still connected to Malta. They have a fort there which they occupy, and it looks like Erik Prince is taking up the Malta of the. Did I say it? Yeah. Erik Prince is taking up. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Erik Prince has taken up the kind of new role of the Knights of Malta, with Blackwater being in Iraq fighting the new Crusades. Sorry about that. So it's very hard to find articles on the Knights of Malta and what they're doing now. So here's one from the Arab newspaper Al Estakal. And here they have Knights of Malta, a state inside the Vatican that runs suspicious and influential lobbies around the world. And let's look at what they have to say about Erik Prince in this article. According to their constitution, the members of the Knights of Malta are divided into 3 classes. The members are able to conduct their lives in an exemplary manner according to the teachings and principles of the Catholic Church, and to devote themselves to the activities of assistance offered by the order. The members of the first class are recognized knights and clergymen, and the members of the second class are military monks, while the members of the third class are laymen who do not recognize religious vows but live according to the principles of the church. In turn, journalist Jeremy Scahill, I highly recommend everyone buy this book to learn all about Blackwater and Erik Prince, said in this book, Blackwater, the rise of the world's most powerful mercenary army, the company's former president, Joseph Schmitz, a former inspector general at the U.S. Department of Defense, expressed his pride in being a member of the Knights of Malta in his official biography. In addition to the missionary crusader attribute of the Knights of Malta, most of the mercenary soldiers in Iraq hold citizenship in the state of the Knights of Malta. So Knights of Malta, like I said before, it's its own state. Like, you can have your own passports. It has its own stuff. So this is why they're able to travel and not go through customs and deliver whatever they really want to wherever they really want to. Noting that 130,000 mercenaries participated in the occupation of Iraq by American forces. Most of the company's manager belonged to the Christian right-wing extremists that ran the United States after President Bush's rise to power in 2001, and all of them boast about their membership in the Knights of Malta, he stated. US Magazine added that Blackwater's contractors in Iraq, officially renamed XZ, use symbols and signs similar to those of peer members such as the Knights Templar in the Middle Ages. Among the suspicious paradoxes, the presence of the names of Arab dictators in the records of the Knights of Malta, like the head of the Syrian regime, Bashar al-Assad, who appeared as a member of the Knights of Malta and holds the rank of Royal Francis Medal, according to an investigation by Al Hayat newspaper on January 2nd, 2015. The newspaper asked, did the Knights of Malta support the president of a criminal regime despite all its violations and public criticism directed at him by the international community since the Syrian people's uprising against him in 2011? Conducting a historical research in the names and people of advanced political stature whose names appeared in the records of the Knights of Malta revealed the presence of famous names belonging to the organization, it pointed out. Most notably, Prescott Bush. I'm not sure if they mean Prescott Bush, the father of George H.W. Bush. I think they may mean the brother of George H.W. Bush, who was also named Prescott Bush. Erik Prince, the founder of Blackwater, the billionaire Rockefeller, a couple Rockefeller billionaires, two of the Kennedys, Joseph and Ted, Queen Elizabeth II of Britain, Juan Carlos, and Valéry Giscard, the former president of France. So, according to the newspaper, Erik Prince is in the Knights of Malta, as is Bashar al-Assad, which is interesting. According to some sources, Nelson Mandela is also a Knight of Malta. I don't know, that's disappointing. So now let's get into another organization that is similar to the Knights of Malta, but different in that it's a little more secretive and a little less militant, but still, I think its goal is to bring together church and state in everywhere, especially Catholic church and state everywhere. Everyone becomes Catholic. All governments run their laws by the rules of Catholicism. All right, so this is Wayne Madsen, good journalist. I've actually used him as a source before. Talked to him a couple times. Amid nonsensical claims by congressional Republicans, including Senator Ron Johnson and Representatives Trey Gowdy, Matt Gaetz, and John Ratcliffe, that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is hosting a secret society intent on ousting Donald Trump from the presidency, comes word from our Middle East sources that the founder of the infamous Blackwater mercenary firm, Erik Prince, is creating a secret army in the Middle East with strong links to the secret fashion Roman Catholic sect Opus Dei. Prince runs a number of private military firms based in the Sheikh Zayed military city located outside of Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Emirates, and in nearby Dubai, the UAE's financial hub. So he's off living in a Muslim country, even though he's a crusader. Go figure. So here's Seymour Hersh. We're going back to the same article we talked about before, where he talked about the kind of religious fanaticism, not necessarily in the private contractors or mercenaries, but just in the military in general. And a lot of the mercenaries and military people, all the mercenaries come from the military. They retire from the military, then they get paid like 10 times what they paid before to be contractors and do the same thing they were doing as soldiers, and worse, with more freedom to kill. All right, so here's what he says. Many of them are members of Opus Dei, Hersh continued. They do see what they're doing, and this is not an atypical attitude among some military. It's a crusade, literally. They see themselves as protectors of the Christians. They're protecting them from the Muslims as in the 13th century, and this is their function. They have little insignias, these coins they pass among each other, which are crusader coins. They have insignia that reflect the whole notion that this is a culture war. Right now, there's a tremendous amount of anti-Muslim feeling in the military community. So who else is connected to Opus Dei? And we're getting all the way back to Bill Barr. I know you've been waiting for Bill Barr this whole episode. Like, how are we going to get to Bill Barr? After stepping down from Verizon in 2008, the year he turned 58, he entered a long, restless semi-retirement in which he did some consulting and was counsel at Washington office for the law firm Kirkland Ellis. He also served on the board of the Catholic Information Center, a downtown gathering spot and place of worship that features priests from the ultra-conservative Opus Dei wing of Catholicism. During his first term as Attorney General, Barr had hired as a speechwriter John Paul Wauck, who later became an Opus Dei priest and has kept in periodic touch with him. So many people have assumed that Barr is a member of Opus Dei that the secret organization issued a statement saying that he's not. So maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I know Opus Dei has like different layers of members. They have their official members and then they have their secret members. But he's a supporter at least. If not a member, he's a big-time supporter of Opus Dei and what they believe in, and one would also think the Knights of Malta. Now, if you really want to look into William Barr, so he's right-wing Catholic. His dad was Jewish, but converted to Catholicism and was in the OSS. So he converted to Catholicism alongside guys like Wild Bill Donovan, James Jesus Angleton, and Bill Casey. All these guys are all OSS guys, and all these guys, I'm not sure about Barr's father, were also in the Knights of Malta. But if you read these two books, Compromise by Terry Reid and John Cummings, and the Tatum Chronicles by Gene Tatum, you will see that William Barr has been accused of being involved in drug running in Mena, Arkansas, and these comes from two separate sources, and he had a code name and everything, and he was kind of the logistics man, making sure that all the cocaine money was counted and right. And who was he working with? William Casey, Knights of Malta, Americares Macaulay, George Bush's friend, Knights of Malta, Oliver North. A lot of people have said that Oliver North is Knights of Malta. I couldn't find any verification for it. He's definitely a supporter of Knights of Malta. Yeah, so there's a couple other things. If you watch, or if you just search, you could find Knights Templar Blackwater shirts. And I think they're authorized by Blackwater. So they believe they're the Knights Templar, the knights who were kicked out of the Catholic Church for heresy and sodomy, and are bad guys in all these video games like Assassin's Creed and movies like The Da Vinci Code and Indiana Jones. So, but no, I was gonna put it up here, but you could, if you want to use Google and you want to see the t-shirts, maybe you want to buy a t-shirt, wear it ironically, but they have Blackwater Knights of Templar shirts. So again, nothing against Catholic people. I have a lot of Irish Catholic friends. I'm from Boston, so just have some problems with their leadership of the Catholic Church. It's been pretty bad for so long, and we see, two issues that have plagued the Catholic Church as a kind of pandemic. We've kind of seen colonialization on one end, and then we also have sexual molestation on the other. And the Knights of Malta are kind of bringing them together, depending on if you believe that they have any Knights of Templar type rituals. But if you look at the activities of people like Cardinall Spellman, who was the Grand Advisor and spiritual protector, the Grand Protector and spiritual advisor of the Knights of Malta, and a really horrible person who was involved in bringing the CIA together with the mob, the Guatemalan coup, 1954. Even J. Edgar Hoover's number 3 under Clyde Tolson. So Clyde Tolson was his boyfriend, lover, and number 2. But the number 3 member was Cartha Deloach, who was also a Knight of Malta. So we've definitely seen from Roy Cohn's circle, Roy Cohn, Donald Trump's mentor, of all these old Knights of Malta, William Casey, Cardinall Spellman, and their associates like J. Edgar Hoover, to the kind of new Knights of Malta under Donald Trump, which have to be Erik Prince. If he is not a Knight of Malta, he's doing his best to replicate what they have done, and he's taking on Knights of Malta as his advisors and his closest confidants and his mentors. So right now, it's really scary. I know it's scary that the deep state is fracturing, and we really don't have any choices. We have the neocons and the theocons. So the neocons are the neoconservatives. They want war for money's sake. They know war is big business. They want American point for American power. And then you have the theocons. And this is why I think you're seeing a fracture between them and the kind of theocons going towards Russia. And as Russia is still Catholic and Christian in some places, and they want to work with Russia or against Russia. It could be a big sneak move. You see that the Wagner Group, who Erik Prince has worked with, is just trying to do a coup on Putin. So it could be a big sneak move. Erik Prince has definitely admitted to being a CIA asset. I'm pretty sure he still is one. He was a CIA asset in Iraq. Like Blackwater is basically a CIA front company. And we've seen the roots in the CIA of the Knights of Malta to the current Blackwater, or whatever Erik Prince's name for his mercenaries are now. Whatever their name is. They're the new Knights of Malta. So that's it, man. I know this has probably been a long episode. This has been Reality Theory, episode 17. I need cash. Cash at me, Casey Gaines, so I can keep on doing this research. CASEYGANE. Cash at me. So I don't have Patreon. You can just hit me direct, and then. But yeah. Also, if you can't cash at me, you can subscribe. You could like this video. You could share. You could post it on Reddit. If you see this video posted on Reddit, give it an upvote. And thanks for sticking with me so long, man. Beware of the Knights of Malta. Peace.